I'm Natasha Mahtani, and I'm an accredited divorce coach based in Northwest London. So I work with women who are pre-divorce, going through divorce or breakup, and even those who've been divorced for a while but still need to heal from it. You can find me on Instagram at Natasha Coaches. So if you like what you hear here, you can access a lot more content there. And I also run global workshops on rewiring our limiting beliefs, parenting through the pandemic, and manifestation. So yeah, like I said, please grab a pen. I want this to be as interactive as possible so you get as much from it as possible. Feel free to comment in the chat box. I'll try and keep an eye on it, and you can ask any questions in there as well. But like Louise said, this is a safe space, but of course it is a public space, so only share what you feel comfortable sharing. Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about me. I was born in this little country called Liberia, which is in West Africa, to Indian parents, and I've lived there in Monrovia, London, Lagos, Mumbai, Dublin, Hong Kong, and Taipei. So with my diverse upbringing, I understand the cultural nuances within relationships, and more specifically, the limiting narratives and the beliefs that come up like with divorce across many cultures. So because, you know, we're in the 21st century, amongst many cultures, divorce is still seen as a no-no. And what always blows my mind about this is our total unpreparedness for it. So we prepare for almost everything else in our lives except breakup. So I'm not saying that we should go into relationships sort of expecting to break up, but what I'm saying is we need to start having more open conversations about it, because it is happening and it's leaving many women feeling alone with a real sense of failure. And these feelings, if they aren't dealt with, they filter through and affect so many different aspects of our lives. So I moved back to London in May 2013. I landed at Heathrow Airport from Hong Kong with my 15-month-old. You know, I had his buggy, his diaper bag, a trolley, no one helping me. And I just felt so broken, confused, embarrassed, and I was on the verge of divorce. And my gut told me I was doing the right thing. Like, I knew why I was leaving, or why I'd left rather. But I was still filled with a sense of shame and a sense of failure and guilt and worry for my child. Let me know in the chat if any of you know those feelings. But I felt like my entire world was turned upside down. I was completely devastated. So it took me 3 or 4 years to go from feeling, you know, completely empty, worthless, and lost to being fulfilled, competent, loving, lovable. And now I'm the happiest I've ever been. And dare I say it, I'm actually grateful to my ex-husband for the experience. And now I help women globally to increase their sense of self-worth, show up for themselves, and identify and rewire their limiting beliefs and thrive in all relationships. And a lot of the time when we go through divorce, women, when they come to me, they often feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, or they're like just in a dark well and they can't see their way out. And a big part of what I do then is to create that light, essentially. So using various tools and strategies, some of which we'll do tonight. But an even bigger part of what I do is to help them rebuild their sense of self-worth, because let's be honest, during a breakup, especially for women, that's usually the first thing to go. But let me be clear, I feel like with our sense of self-worth, it's this beautiful kind of silver dish, for example, and it's always there, so it never disappears. It's just that over the course of our lives, and more specifically, if we've been in a relationship that hasn't worked, it's almost like taking Vaseline and spreading it over that. So we can see it's under there, but it's kind of covered in this stuff. So we have to kind of remove that self-judgment, that comparison, that idealism, you know, expectations, and forgive ourselves to realize that it's under there. So I want to try and get a bit interactive. I want you to pop in the chat, what was your overriding emotion? It can be 1 or 2 words when you got divorced or broke up with your partner. Pop it in the chat box. What was your overriding emotion? How did you feel? Yeah. Relief. I know that feeling. Failure, sadness. Yeah. Relief and sad. Failure. Thank you, sadness. I thought I did something wrong, that I wasn't good enough. Oh, I feel that, Samantha. I felt that. Emotional for my daughter. Yeah. Cherise, I felt that for my son. I sometimes still feel that for him. failure and hate it. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. And what that shows is that, you know, you're not alone in these feelings. Like we all, I could relate to pretty much all of those. And you know, especially for women, that sense of failure comes up quite a bit. So going through a separation or divorce, it can be pretty life-changing. For me, you know, I moved back across the world, and so it's not unusual to find yourself lacking in confidence and having low self-esteem. Even when you make the choice to leave, it can be hard to move forward and thrive in life. Because it is a grieving process, and it's important that we kind of go through the process and those emotions rather than, you know, brushing them under the carpet. And that happens a lot, especially as women. You kind of think, I've got to look after my kids, I've got to do this, and any emotion you're feeling, you kind of brush it under the carpet. But I find when you do that, what ends up happening is before you know it, there's this bump, and you end up almost tripping over it yourself because you just let it build. And the other very important thing when you first get divorced or break up is ensuring that you have a support system in place, because it's really common to feel isolated and lonely as well. And actually, this is why we're all here, because Frollo does such a great job of ensuring that single parents have that community to turn to, which I think is absolutely amazing. So everyone here is at different stages of their divorce. So I'm just going to keep things pretty generic, but if you have any specific questions, then please drop them in the chat box. But in terms of how to build your confidence back up post-divorce, I want us to begin by reframing the narrative. So, you know, this idea of like failure and sadness, I want us to reframe it. So for many people, definitely for me, my divorce felt like a failure. My whole childhood, and I was, you know, I come from the South Asian community. I was raised to believe that marriage was forever, that settling into your marriage, even if you had like a love marriage, took time, and that it was a woman's responsibility to make her marriage work. And this was stuff that I heard, you know, my entire life. And identifying these things, the things that, you know, that I heard, that I saw, that I witnessed, allowed me to see how my beliefs were created. So the more conscious we can become of these words we heard or things we experienced or saw, which created our deep-rooted beliefs, the easier it is then to rewire those beliefs. So I want you to take a second to consider, and it will be different for everybody, but I want you to take a second to consider where your beliefs lie with regards to divorce. So it could be that you had parents who said, your happiness is of utmost importance, so if you're not happy, then leave. Or it could be that you saw your mom making all the sacrifices, and so you believe that's the only way that a marriage will work. So whatever it is for you, write it down. If you feel called to drop it in the chat, then please do. I'll give you a second. Okay, so hopefully you've written them down for yourself. So now that you have your beliefs, I want you to think about what you'd like your belief to be instead. So it could be, my children are growing up in a loving environment, because a lot of people, and I think I heard Zoe, who's the founder of Frollo, talking to Helen recently, and she was saying how she went on a, I think it was a live, and she said how she went on a date, and the person she went on the date with said to her, like, oh, what's it like with your son growing up in a broken family? And when I heard her say that, I was like, oh, because, you know, that is it. And I had that belief. So maybe my reframe would be, my child is growing up in a loving environment, or I feel safe now. So whatever it is that your belief is based on things you've heard, what would you like to believe instead? And then write that down. Okay, So this new belief is what we want to create going forward, so that when you have those moments of spiraling, and you will, it's totally normal, then you have something new to turn to. So you have something to turn your focus towards. And once you have your new belief, I want you to then center yourself. And you can do this by either like putting your hand on your chest and rubbing your heart chakra and just saying your new belief out loud. So it might be, my child is growing up in a loving environment. Or it just could be like one line, almost like an affirmation that you have that you use as your central guiding point. So when you have those moments, you just say it to yourself, like, my child is growing up in a loving environment. I feel safe now. And changing your focus does take time, but the more you repeat this to yourself, the more hardwired this thought becomes. I already feel so much better about my beliefs. Thank you. Oh, my pleasure. Okay, so the next way to build your self-confidence is to make yourself feel important again. So I know that as a mom of a young child, when he was 15 months when I moved back, I found it extremely difficult in those early days to do anything for myself. There was a real sense of guilt. And I also believe back then I totally overcompensated with him because I was the one who left. So then there was the guilt of having left. Well, I have to do all these things and be the perfect mom and take him to this class and take him to the park every day. And I completely and utterly exhausted myself. And I think a part of building yourself back up and kind of getting that courage and clarity and confidence is to remember that you are important. So prioritizing yourself, it has a compound effect or a snowball effect. So it's the little things that make the big difference. Now, for some of you, this might be easier because perhaps, perhaps your ex has your kids for a couple of days a week. For others, it might be more challenging if you're a solo parent, or if like me, your ex isn't in your life. But whatever the situation, try and carve out some time every week for yourself to do something that just brings you a little joy, that isn't linked to your children at all. So it could be small things like having a bubble bath and a glass of wine when they're in bed, or catching up with a friend for coffee, or going for a run, or joining a pottery class while they're at school, painting your nails, or cooking your favorite dinner, like something you want and not what will the kids eat, and then I'll just eat leftovers. And I'm going to go a little woo here because I do a lot of, workshops around manifestation, but with each little act of kindness that you show yourself, the message that you're sending out there to the universe or whatever greater power you believe in is that I'm important, I matter, and I too exist. And the more we send these messages out via actions, the more we have to be grateful for, and the more that, comes back to us. So it's also about understanding that unless you show up for yourself, you can't fully show up for anyone or anything else. So put a woo in the chat box if you're feeling that. If you're feeling that unless you show up for yourself, you can't fully show up for anyone or anything else. Woo. Great. Cool. And then that brings me to my next point, gratitude. I can't stress just how important this one is. Having an attitude of gratitude is probably something you've seen come up on your Instagram or on your Facebook. And while we often know that we have a lot to be grateful for, it's not often that we acknowledge it, or at least not often enough. But cultivating a habit of being grateful for every good thing that comes to you and to give thanks continuously, again, it's just another tool or another strategy to direct your mind towards more positive thinking. I can vouch for the fact that this works because I didn't do this for a long time. And then when I started doing it and practicing it daily, everything sort of aligned. It was like, how did that happen? Like, oh, I don't like it just starts happening for you. And also when you have those moments where you're just feeling like, oh, this is frustrating. If you have that kind of, I don't know, journal that you've been writing in, or you have that practice of gratitude, it's almost like your brain kicks in and it's like, oh, but you have all of this now. Oh yeah. Like I don't have to worry about that. So I know, and I don't want to sit here and act like this is easy. It is a practice, and I get it. Also, if, like I said, I'm not sure where everyone is in terms of how long they've been separated for, but when you first get separated or you're going through a breakup, it can honestly feel difficult. Like you have nothing to be grateful for, but there's always something, even if you can find one thing in your day. You know, and because the thing is, when we're not kind of practicing or expressing gratitude, what we're most likely doing is focusing on the past and everything that went wrong and everything that happened to us. And now here's the thing, I'm going to get all geeky and sciencey on you, but our bodies don't know the difference between something imagined and something in reality. And there's all these, like, there's all this science now and all this evidence to back it up. But every time we go over our divorce story or our breakup story, we're experiencing that pain in our body, even when it's not happening anymore. So even when it's all over, if we think of it and go through that story, and that's the reason why, you know, you can almost conjure up an emotion about something that's happened even a decade ago, just by thinking about it and putting yourself back into that space. But by practicing gratitude, you're almost like teaching your mind to focus on the good things. And then you end up shifting your focus to a more compelling future rather than a dreary past. So I have a gratitude journal that I write in most nights, but if this feels like it's just another thing you have to do and another thing that's on your plate, you put the kids to bed and you're tired, don't do it. Don't do it. Because honestly, it's all about the energy that you do it with. And so that's totally fine. But what you can do instead is just say a little thank you. So you're driving and it's all green lights and you literally, thanks. Or you find a parking spot and you drive into and like, thank you. Like just say it out loud. Or you're rushing to school and it's starting to rain and then the bus pulls up and you're like, thank you. You know, just those little acknowledgements throughout the day can make such a big difference. It's all about refocusing our mind and refocusing where our mind goes to throughout our day and in those moments when things aren't always going great. So yeah, just do it with that. And actually, I will say there's another one you can do with your children, depending on how old they are. And I did this all through lockdown with my son, and it was really, really helpful. It also gives them a really, really safe space to talk about what they want. Sorry, but it was called Petal, Thorn, and Bud. And so we'd say, what are your petals for the day? And we'd talk about things he was grateful for. And then we'd say, what's your thorn? And it would give him the opportunity to actually say something that was bothering him. And I can tell you that during lockdown, sometimes it was like, well, I didn't really like the way you spoke to me like that today. And I was like, okay, well, I didn't really like the fact that you wouldn't do your work when I asked you to. But it gives you would be amazed at how much your children as well open up. So you don't even have to do several petals. You can do 2 petals, a bud, a thorn, and then the bud is something they're looking forward to the next day. So it's actually something that you can do with them. But if not, I suppose it's something that you can do on your own as well. But it was really helpful for us to do it, you know, just before bedtime. And yeah, like I said, with the gratitude, it doesn't need to be the big things. It can just be like, he puts, you know, his plate in the sink. So whatever it is, it doesn't have to be the big things. Just start by acknowledging all the small things. Start by noticing them. And see what comes up. But with that in mind, how about you tell me what you're grateful for right now? One thing. You can just drop it in the chat box. Well, thanks, Wendy. Yeah, it's a really great thing to do with your child. Grateful for this time. Yeah, grateful for your brother, your children, and your home. Lovely. A warm home. Yeah, a warm home. I'm grateful for the sunshine today. It's cold, but at least the sun is shining. Cool. Okay. My morning run. Brilliant. I'm grateful for my daughter. Lovely. And family. I'm grateful to friends and support that they give me. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm grateful for you guys being so open and sharing. Right. Let's move on to self-talk. So words have some serious weight. They carry energy, and essentially this is what gives language its power. So if you think back to your childhood again, you'd be able to choose words or sentences that were said to you that stuck even 20 or 30 years later, and these can be both positive or negative. And for some of you, it might not even be words in your childhood. It could be, you know, things that your ex-partner said to you, you know, words or sentences that have stuck and they've now they're now so ingrained in how you see yourself. So with that in mind, it's important to be conscious of how we use our words, like the ones that we so easily say to ourselves. Because again, the more conscious we become of the words that we're unconsciously using, the more we deepen our relationship with ourselves. So I want you to start to recognize the words and the sentences that you're saying to yourself, because this will help you to identify where your lack lies. So it could be, no one's going to be interested in a single mom, like I'm never going to meet anyone, or look at my mom tongue, or I just feel so scruffy. These are all things that I've thought. Because most of us feel, guilty. Most of us are guilty, of this, negative self-talk, especially post-divorce, because there's no one else that's propping you up or paying us compliments or telling us we're doing a good job. And so we need to do that for ourselves. So stopping this cycle of negative self-talk, it takes practice and it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. But if you catch yourself even twice a day or thrice a day, that's 2 or 3 less times than you would have if you hadn't caught yourself, if you hadn't made that, if you hadn't started noticing it and making it more conscious. So catch yourself when you have that thought pop into your head and literally stop it. So for me, I gave my mind a name. She's Clarice. And so sometimes I might literally say, Clarice, stop it, Clarice, and then change that thought to something else or something more positive, or at least something neutral. So in the early years, if I couldn't get to that point of, it being really positive, then at least neutral. And later on this evening, if you'd like to go deeper with this exercise, you can consider why you're talking to yourself negatively. So where is that narrative coming from? Was it something that your ex-partner said to you that's now stayed with you? Was it something, parents said to you with regards to what marriage should be like? So however it is you're speaking to yourself, where have you heard it? Where have you seen it? Where have you seen it before? And if you realize that you're being triggered, and you figure out where it's coming from, then you may want to consider cutting that off for a while. So I am very big into using the mute button on social media, on Instagram, even for people that I care about. So this is permission to you to mute people, even if it's people you love, because it doesn't mean that you love them any less. It just means you love yourself more. You realize that that's triggering you, and you're going to mute them for a while, just until you're able to lift yourself out of that space and out of those feelings. And then you can unmute them and you never even know. Okay. And it just helps you to connect with yourself again. So I'd like you to imagine that you're in a bathroom. Okay. You're in a bathroom, the tap is on, water is gushing out, and it's flooding the bathroom. Pop in the chat box, tell me, what would you do? The water's coming up, you're starting to feel overwhelmed, the whole place is flooding. What would you do? Yes. Thank you, Emma. You would turn the tap off. Got it in one. You turn the tap off. You would just turn the tap off because you can see where the flood's coming from. You can see where the overwhelm is coming from. We need to do that in our lives too. We need to identify where it's coming from, where the overwhelm is coming from. In the case of the bathroom, it's flooding the bathroom. And in the same way that we'd simply turn the tap off, we need to do that in our lives too. So identify what's causing us to feel the overwhelm or feel bad about ourselves and turn that off or mute that. And to take the positive self-talk a little step further, okay, think of something that you can get on board with. So something you do believe, like the affirmation you came up with earlier maybe, or, make a physical one. So it might be about how you feel about yourself physically. And if you so dare, I want you to say this to yourself tomorrow morning in front of the mirror out loud. Now, I can already see some of you recoiling slightly at the idea. It will feel awkward the first time that you do it, but I promise you it gets easier and it works wonders for your confidence over time. So think about how easy it is to compliment a friend, right? Your friend walks past and you're like, oh my God, I love your dress, or love that lipstick, or what you do to your hair. We do it so easily. And so a big part of building our confidence back up is to find it as easy to do it to ourselves. So if you can't bring yourself to do that yet, then you know what? Just wink at yourself tomorrow in the mirror. Just look at yourself in the mirror when you're getting ready and just wink at yourself, or on your way out of the house, or, you know, whenever it is, when you're brushing your teeth. And if you do manage to do it, then come to Instagram and tell me about it. I'd love to hear from you. Natasha coaches, come there and be like, I winked to myself this morning and it felt great. Or I paid myself a compliment and it felt awkward as hell. And I'll just say to you, try it again tomorrow. It'll feel a little easier tomorrow, and then try it again the next day. And that's another, you know, really easy way that you can build that confidence and kind of get rid of that Vaseline I was talking about, just to see that amazing sense of self-worth that you all have. So I'm just keeping an eye on the time. I want to ensure that we have enough time for questions. So the last tool I'm going to suggest to you is kindness. So I want you to consider what it is your best friend does for you. So when you think of your best friend, what is it about them that makes you love them so much? So while I wait for you to pop it in the chat box, I'll tell you some of mine. With one of my best friends, she's always championing my accomplishments. So I'll do something and she'll just buy me chocolates and be like, oh, you know, well done for doing that. I'm so proud of you. Or I'll start something new and she'll have flowers delivered and be like, onwards and upwards to new beginnings, or something like that. And she listens without judgment when I speak. And with my other best friend, we don't speak often. She lives in Ireland, but it's like, she's like the stars, you know. I know she's always there, even if I can't always see her, I don't see her often enough. And when we do catch up, we literally pick up exactly where we left off. So what is it about your best friends that stand by me, believing in me? Yeah. Listening without judgment, always being there makes me laugh. Her kindness and understanding. Yeah, listen to that judgment, listen to this. Yeah, that comes up a lot. Never judges, gets me. And there you go again. We all just want to be heard. We all just want to be heard and not judged. Beautiful. Listening and get each other. My best friend who listens, who's supportive, encourages, always knows when I need a hug, understands me, is fun. Everyone needs that one person who gives a good hug. One of my cousins, who's like the best hugger in the world. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. So those are beautiful. Makes me laugh every time. Messaging me out of the blue in the day to check on me. Oh, those are the best when you're not expecting them. Cool. So now that we have all of those, I want you to imagine, some of you might know where I'm going with this. I want you to imagine how it would feel and how you would feel if you were being all those things to yourself. So telling yourself what you'd like to, you know, what you'd tell a friend if they were going through if they were having a bad day. The same level of compassion and the same level of kindness that you give to your best friend and that your best friend gives to you, I want you to give that to yourself. Think about how that would feel. Like, close your eyes for a second and really tap into how that would feel if you gave that to yourself. Like if you made yourself laugh, or if you just listened to yourself, and if you were supportive and you encouraged yourself without judgment, and you were kind to yourself and kind to your body, how would that feel? Now I want you to give that to yourself. And finally, I'm just going to pull up my phone because I've written it here. I want to leave you with a quote from one of my favorite books, and one actually that I recommend all women read or actually listen to on Audible because she narrates it. It's Untamed by Glennon Doyle. So I don't know if have any of you read it? Let's see. Yeah, Louise has read it. Okay, if you haven't, it is so worth it. But I'll just read the quote out for you. So on motherhood, she says, "Mothers have martyred themselves in their children's names since the beginning of time. We have lived as if she who disappears the most loves the most. We have been conditioned to prove our love by slowly ceasing to exist. What a terrible burden for children to bear, to know that they are the reason their mother stopped living. What a terrible burden for our daughters to bear, to know that if they choose to become mothers, this too will be their fate. Because if we show them that being a martyr is the highest form of love, that is what they will become. They will feel obligated to love as well as their mothers loved after all. They will believe they have permission to live only as fully as their mothers allowed themselves to live. If we keep passing down the legacy of martyrdom to our daughters, with whom does it end? Which woman ever gets to live? And when does the death sentence begin? At the wedding altar, in the delivery room? Whose delivery room, our children's or our own? When we call martyrdom love, we teach our children that when love begins, life ends. So when you're building your confidence back up and you're raising a sense of self-worth, yes, you're firstly doing it for you, but just remember that you're doing it for your kids too. Oh, Emma's halfway through, brilliant. I love it. Name the book again, Untamed by Glennon Doyle. Oh, so I will, if you guys have any questions, feel free to either pop them in the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask them. Give you a second, but if you don't have any, that's totally fine as well. Thank you for insightful meeting. Thank you. Thank you all so much for showing up. I am so, so grateful that you took the time out to come here this evening. Thank you for making me feel good. So you are welcome, Karen. Yeah. You need to practice. Yes, Cherise. And just remember that sometimes, you know, I don't know if I can see if I can find a way to put it up, or maybe we can link it, Louise, in the notes when it goes up on YouTube. But there's an emotional guidance scale. You can look it up and Google it, but basically it shows the different emotions. And the whole point of it is when you're moving through the emotions, I think there's about 22 of them. You're not trying to get from the bottom to the top in one go. You know, so even in terms of practicing positive thoughts about yourself, think about the next best thing that you can say that you can believe. It doesn't need to be like you're feeling really down and out. You don't want your thought to be like, I feel great, because that's not going to, the energy behind that is not going to feel like, well, believable to you in that moment. And it's also not going to feel like it's achievable. And so when you say it to yourself, you're really not going to feel it. So just think about the next one you can talk about. But emotional guidance scale, like I said, have a look, because even though an emotion can sometimes feel negative, if it's still 2 up from where you were before, that's still a positive. You're still going in the right direction. Another question, but the things you said are so simple and can make a huge difference if we're kind to ourselves. Yeah. It really is about the little things. Like, it's really not about the big things when it comes to like changing it and becoming more confident. It's that one little thing that you can do each day. Something to really think about is how we treat our friends or they treat us. Why don't I treat myself with the same kindness? Yeah, and that's a really important question to ask yourself. Why don't I treat myself with the same kindness? And again, if you look back to things you've heard or things that were said to you, that will often show you where that's coming from. And another thing that I tend to ask myself a lot is, when something happens, is what am I making this mean about me? So what am I making this mean about me? Because a lot of the times when something happens, like just for example, as an example, say I go on a first date and it doesn't work out. And I see this a lot with clients as well. For a lot of women, their first thought is, oh, didn't he like me? Did I talk too much? Is it my hair? Like, you know, that's their first thought. So I'm like, what am I making this mean about me? I'm making it mean I'm not good enough. I'm going to change that. So that's a question you can ask yourself anytime you feel like you're kind of just not feeling great about something. Yes, I love that. Be careful how you speak to yourself. You are listening. Yeah, I have something very similar on my phone. I think it's be careful what you say out loud, because every cell in your body is listening.